A 72-hour truce may have silenced both Israeli and Hamas weapons, but it has not silenced critics of the Jewish state. On Tuesday, the British Foreign Office Minister Saidi Warsi resigned from the government, saying its policy on the crisis in Gaza was morally indefensible. She wrote on Twitter that she was leaving with deep regret and called for international action to end the crisis.
My view has been that our policy in relation to the Middle East peace process generally, but more recently our approach and language during the current crisis in Gaza, is morally indefensible, is not in Britain's national interest, and will have a long-term detrimental impact on our reputation internationally and domestically.
Last week, the US State Department strongly criticised Israel's strike on a UN school where people had taken shelter. Although the US was quick to blame Hamas again after a 72-hour ceasefire collapsed, no such similar criticism was forthcoming from the UK. Chancellor George Osborne on Tuesday said he was disappointed with Baroness Warsi's parting shot and insisted that British policy on Gaza was clear.
Well, I think this is a disappointing and frankly unnecessary decision. The British government is working with others in the world to bring peace to Gaza, and we do have now a tentative ceasefire, which of course we all hope will hold.
Warsi was previously chairman of the Conservative Party and became the first Muslim cabinet minister when David Cameron took office in 2010. She had been demoted from the cabinet to a middle-ranking foreign office post 2 years ago. Nabila Ramdani is a Middle East analyst. She said Warsi was taking a stand over how much the British government and the British public were at odds over the conflict in Gaza.
Well, I believe that Baroness Warsi took really a brave, principled stand because she's the first Western politician who is speaking out effectively against the usual pro-Israel consensus.
Backbench Tory MPs had been calling on Mr Cameron to take a more robust line with Israel over accusations that its actions are disproportionate. This could mean that further high-profile party figures could follow Lady Warsi's lead, as Nabila Ramdani explains.
And the lack of criticism of the Israeli military has been unbelievably shocking, and it is only now that a few senior Conservative Party politicians are effectively breaking rank. We had Boris Johnson, the Mayor of London, using his position outside the government to condemn the violence as being wholly disproportionate and horrifying. But remember that Mr Johnson is regularly tipped as the future Prime Minister himself. But at the moment he's outside the government, and that gives him the confidence to speak out and voice his concern.
Meanwhile, Tinseltown has also taken up the cudgels in the international clamour against Israel. Figures as varied as Rihanna, Javier Bardem and Penelope Cruz have also criticised the Jewish state over the 4-week conflict in Gaza that has left 1,800 people dead. Criticism of Israel is seen at best a bad career move and at worst breaking a taboo in Hollywood. The actor Jon Voight, who is father of Angelina Jolie, returned fire on Israel's critics, saying they could incite anti-Semitism across the world. There is concern at a spike in anti-Israel protests across Europe. Glyn Secker is a spokesman for the British-based group Jews for Palestine Peace. He feels uneasy that people are conflating the actions of the Israeli government, which he disapproves of, as representing the views of Jews worldwide.
I think it's a real problem, but I think the responsibility for it falls squarely on the shoulders of Netanyahu and the Israeli government and their Hasbara campaign. They make very pronounced statements that Israel speaks for all Jews, coupled with this long-standing notion of the so-called right of return of Jews to Palestine. It means that all Jews, sort of like, whether we like it or not, we all end up being represented by Israel.
Hollywood has close ties to Israel, involving liberal Jews such as Steven Spielberg, Jeffrey Katzenberg and Barbara Streisand. But the bombing of UN-run schools and the sheer extent of civilian casualties have led many figures to speak out. The Daily Show host Jon Stewart, who himself is Jewish, said questioning Israel's policies is not the same as being pro-Hamas. Glyn Secker of the group Jews for Palestine Peace says the blame for this confusion lies with an extra-conservative Israeli government.
Israel then uses the developing anti-Semitism to say, look, everybody is instinctively anti-Semitic. We're the only safe place in the world for Jews to be. We know where this international anti-Semitism leads and make references to the Holocaust. So then Israel manages to place itself above criticism. So then it can do the most horrific things in the name of the Israeli state as the safe place for Jews, and no one is allowed to criticize them.
Much of the entertainment industry has stayed silent, leaving speculation that Hollywood stars can pontificate on South Sudan, gay marriage, but they must leave Gaza alone. And in Britain, there could be further pressure on David Cameron to speak out against Israel, following the first resignation of a minister in his government over a matter of policy.